All right, everybody, welcome to the Next Level You Summit. So excited that you guys are here. My name is Melissa Kibler, and I'm going to be your host as we navigate this interview series. Joining me is Erik Sorenson. I'm going to get to him in just a second, but I just want to share with everybody really the reason why I put together and hosting this summit, Next Level You, is really just, I think we all want everybody to have this amazing breakthrough, right? Amazing breakthrough, especially if you are on here, if you opted into this thing and you're like, yes, that sounds like me. I'm ready to kind of kick it into gear, and kind of dive into that next level. But there might be an area where you feel like, you know what, I'm really not playing full out. Maybe I'm feeling like I'm playing small a little bit. And this is, Erik, and this is something that you can kind of touch on as well too, but it doesn't really matter from what I found is that it really doesn't matter what level you're at. Sometimes it seems like no matter what level you get to, this vicious cycle always seems to kind of come back, at us, whether it comes to fear of failure, fear of success, lack of belief, maybe lack of clarity, direction, like all the things. And it kind of keeps us sometimes playing small, right? So that's what I really want to talk about today. So we can navigate that, because playing small, we know, doesn't do us no good, especially when we know deep inside of us that we are capable of so much more. And really, that's the conversation that I want to have today, to really empower everybody on here to really step into that full leadership potential that they know that they are capable of. So I want to introduce my first speaker. So I'm super excited to have you on here, Erik Sorenson. Let's go. If you can share with everybody just a little bit about you and your background and what do you do?
Yes, but I want to comment on what you said, because it was so big, and I love the name of this as well, because you're right. At every level, we struggle. I'm in this mastermind, and it's an insanely high level mastermind with really high level people, meaning it's a $250,000 mastermind just to get in. And I was talking to the head of that mastermind. Her name is Krista Mayshore. She's amazing. She's a speaker, and she has a really cool niche. And she was like, Erik, I can't believe it that I work with entrepreneurs that are early on in their journey, and I work now with these high level, successful, established entrepreneurs, and they all have the same problem. They're bigger problems, but they have the same problems. Mm-hmm. At every level, there is a ledge that you have to climb over to ultimately get to the level of success. And then when you climb that mountain, all of a sudden there's a next level as well of where you want to get to. And so it is always this constant battle with us entrepreneurs to what's the next version of me and how can I get there quickly? So as you mentioned, yes, my name is Erik Sorenson, and I am probably like you all, a serial entrepreneur. I've spent 18 years in the space now, in the agency space. And just in the last 4 years, in coaching and training and speaking and authoring books, like my latest book, Commit First. And so I work with entrepreneurs. I worked with over 1,000, 1,500 or so business owners over the years, and helping them level up their game and level up their business. My mission is really to do two things. Number one, wake up entrepreneurs to the potential that they have. And number two, help them rise to it, which leads to what I believe an extraordinary business that turns into an extraordinary life. And that's my mission.
I love that. So good. And that's really, I carefully chose each of these speakers, especially with Erik. And I chose Erik because, not only I follow you, and I'm so inspired just watching you show up. You just have such a contagious energy and drive. And I think really that's what everybody's after. It's not to compare, but that's what everybody's after, to wake up feeling just super excited and motivated to go out there and make a difference. And it doesn't matter what level you're at as a leader. Sometimes, I've worked with people too, and I'm sure you do too. You can have the income, but what I find is what's missing sometimes is that connection, that fulfillment, that meaningful impact that's going to get you to wake up and feel excited every single day. So that's one of the reasons why I chose you. And I'm so excited that you shared that, because it is every level so different. And every level is something that we just have to continue to keep in mind these things, because it's never that destination.
So as you mentioned, money is a great motivator, but I can tell you from experience right now, it is not the ultimate motivator. It will keep you going. It will keep you running. But ultimately, what happens when you actually have the money you want? Yeah. Well, then what? Would you stop doing the thing that you were doing? There has to be something more. And I think in every entrepreneur's life, there has to be a pivot point. I often worried, because if you look at some of the largest entrepreneurs in the country and influencers, they all had horrible, or most of them, horrible upbringings, kicked out of their house, homeless, didn't have any money, whatever that would be. that was never me. I grew up in a great, loving, incredible family. And part of me was like, maybe it would have been better if I would have been like, in the depths of darkness in my youth. But I found it somewhere else because life has a way of really coming at you. As Tony Robbins likes to say, that weeds of life grow automatically. The pain is inevitable. Suffering's a choice, but pain is inevitable. And I found a pivot point, and it wasn't literally less than 5 years ago where I actually sold a business. I had the money. And I'm like, this is awesome. This is great. And you're seeing your bank account grow in an instant once the business closed. And I'm thinking this is the coolest thing. And I thought this was the pinnacle of my success. You know what happened? It was awesome for about 3 weeks.
Oh.
And then I realized that what I was chasing wasn't actually money. And my business essentially was my identity. And you guys feel that way? Like it is you. When I sold the business, figuratively, I sold my soul, which was completely misplaced emotions for sure. However, it led me down a completely unexpected path. For example, I spent probably 15 years up to that point. I hated reading books. Frankly, I would have never attended your summit, not because it's not amazing, but because I just never did those things. I never went to a conference. I hated going to masterminds. I would have never been speaking on a stage. I would have never read a book, let alone written a book. But after that experience, my life went into a massive downward spiral. And you probably saw this from me basically not publishing any type of content or anything, all of a sudden going crazy. Well, I got to the point where life got so bad, and not just my business. I was trying to find like what I wanted to do. I didn't know what to do. I grasped at straws. I went and tried to partner with some people. It went really bad, really fast. Nothing was working. And my relationships were going downhill too. And I felt like I was serving nobody but myself. I felt like I was being selfish. And I kind of hit rock bottom. And I'll never forget this pivot point in my life. And hopefully, if you haven't had yours yet, you have it soon, or you've had it. And that is this. I was at the bottom, not knowing where to go, feeling actually depressed, which is not me, right? You know my personality, and that's just not who I am. I've never actually been a depressed person. In fact, I actually thought that depression really wasn't a thing. It's easy to say when you're happy. And the reality is I was dead wrong. It is a real thing, and I went through it. And I'm sitting there in the darkness of my life, and I read a quote that came into my life at the right time that just lit me on fire, and everything changed. And here's the quote: that the scariest day of your life is the day you die, when the person you are meets the person you could have become. And that launched me on a pattern that you see today, because it scared me so much, the fact that I was nowhere near the person I could become. I believe business is a calling. I believe you're called to serve. Whether or not you believe in God is irrelevant, because I believe you're called to serve a people, and the intensity and magnitude of the opposition sometimes is equal to the intensity and the magnitude of the calling that you have. And I'm sitting there feeling this like pull to something, and I didn't know what it was. And that quote woke me up, and I went crazy. I started reading books, attending seminars, attending conferences, hiring coaches, hiring influencing, grasping for straws to pull myself out of this pit that I had gotten myself into. And it led me to the day that everything changed, which is May 22nd, 2019, not that long ago. I guess it's been 4 years.
Wow.
And that's when I moved forward to the life that I'm living right now, full of influence, impact, and income. And it's been amazing.
You touched upon that pivot moment, and that's something where, to your point, a lot of people think, well, I don't have that pivot moment, or maybe they do. It just, they think of that thing that shook them, right? But some people, you'll be surprised. Some people are like, well, I don't have that story, or I don't have that pivot moment. But all it was for you was that shift, that was something that caught your attention enough, that quote, where it just lit a fire in you to do something about that, right? To make that change. But I want to kind of dig a little deeper, if you don't mind, when that quote that kind of triggered you to kind of do something about that and to live your life a little bit differently. But as far as how did you go about it? As far as the direction and the vision and getting clarity around that next focus, if that makes sense.
I didn't actually know what the next focus was. All I felt that I was pulled, and feel like I had that feeling in my pit, like a pit in my stomach, that I was called for something more. There was something more I needed to do. There was a direction I needed to go. I actually didn't know at the time, but I knew when I read that quote that I need to figure it out. So that's why I started reading about a book a week. I went to 7 Tony Robbins events in 1 year. I hired Garrett White as a coach. I went to join Brendan Burchard's programs. I went and reached as high as I possibly could to the people that I thought had the answers. And the cool thing about it is, even though the answer came from me figuring it out myself, they were very influential in understanding, like, the content that they gave me helped me really dive into my purpose, who I really am, who I was meant to become, and how I can focus on becoming my future self earlier than ever before. And it was funny because it's kind of like, you can spend all these money on all these programs, and that's great. And they will definitely help you level up your life, but it's like kind of buying the car. And the car has all the bells and whistles, but if it doesn't actually have any gas in the tank, it will never get you to the destination that you want to go to. So I believe that, the purpose of knowledge is not to know something. We always hear that knowledge is power. It's not. It's potential power, right? But the purpose of knowledge and knowing is growing. It's going. And I had to take that knowledge and move and actually do something with it. And there's this really cool thing called the law of 10 that I discovered along this. And here's what it is. Essentially is if you're moving in a direction, let's just say you just choose something, anything. If you feel like, hey, I need to be a speaker, I need to be an author, I need to be an influencer, I need to build courses, I need to do webinars, I need to do an e-com program, whatever that is, start moving and try something 10 times. It probably won't work the first or the second or the third. And this is when most people quit. But if you keep going, 1 or 2 things are going to happen after the 10th try or before. Number 1, either you'll be successful at that thing, or number 2, more importantly, you'll actually find your way during that journey. You'll find where you were meant to go all along. And that was me. I tried a bunch of different things, failed. And then all of a sudden I figured out what I was meant to do. Number 1, I'm a speaker. I speak a lot at a lot of conferences now, which wasn't me even 2 or 3 years ago. Obviously speaking and creating content leads people to the programs that are in my life, and the programs that you're creating right now to be able to get them to that next level. Because as you know, it is really tough to hear something and then take it and say, okay, I'm going to be successful at it and actually be successful. I bet you less than 1% of entrepreneurs can actually do that. What it usually takes, in my case, probably yours, and 99.9% of this audience, is to get help from somebody else. Dr. Benjamin Hardy wrote about it in his book, Be Your Future Self Now. He did a dissertation during his, I believe it was his doctorate degree, where he studied entrepreneurs, and he's like, what was the trigger point where they went from where they were to all of a sudden exploding to where they wanted to go? Here's what it was. Most of the time, it was a financial investment in themselves, usually hiring a coach or something. And because they say that the transformation is in the transaction, well, when you hire a coach or join a program like you have, for example, I assume you have a program behind this, but if they start, joining a program, what ends up happening is they're spending money that maybe they don't have. And as you guys know, people that pay attention. I spent $50,000 on a coach one time earlier on, and that was the most money I'd ever spent. Do you think I did every single thing that coach told me to do? I had $50,000 worth of skin in the game. You better believe it. And it only took me 2 weeks after hiring that coach to get my investment back, which was crazy to me, more than that, actually. So yeah, there's a few little golden nuggets that I learned along my journey, but it starts with just start going. You're going to be frustrated because you're not going to know exactly what you're meant to do or who you are just yet. I promise you, it will come, and the journey is worth, for sure, every
Erik, this is gold right here. Like, if people haven't picked this up yet, this is gold, because it's taking ownership. We got to take that ownership and figure out whatever it is. And sometimes that's the thing where we feel like we have to have this figured out. And that's the most frustrating thing, when we can't quite put the finger on it, or that direction, or what we're called to do, or that sense of purpose. And it can be so frustrating when you don't have that. But that's gold, Erik. It's yeah, you just have to keep picking yourself back up and taking the action. You just have to go and move, and just getting around the people that can guide you and maybe ask you the right questions or whatever it is. But taking the action is truly the key to figuring it out. I love that you said that.
It is. And along that journey, make sure you ask yourself a couple of things. Start paying attention at what you hate doing in this journey of entrepreneurship. Because I believe there's a gift inside of that. Obviously, if you hate doing something, it's probably not in line with who you are. That doesn't mean it doesn't need to be done. So that's what you have to really filter it. Okay, do I find a who for this, or do I just not do it at all? But find the things that don't bring you joy in the entrepreneurial journey, things you hate, meaning maybe it's the type of messaging. Do you want, depending on what direction you want to go, think about the things that do bring you joy, that feel like you're talented in that they are your superpowers, that you feel like aligned with. When you're talking about this subject, or when you're creating a program, what could you do all day long and absolutely love it? That is an entrepreneurial function, right? For me, I can build content all day long. I can build live events. I could speak at 10 conferences in a day and be completely exhilarated by the end of the day. Not the other way around. I did a 4-day Nashville live event about a month ago, exactly a month from now. I was there. We did a 2-day mastermind with sort of my inner circle group. I call them the Platinum Partners. And it was all day. And I speak a lot during these. And then Here World, which was my 2-day live event, I had, I think, 15 or 16 speakers that I invited to speak to that, some pretty high profile speakers. And after every night, I mean, I was up at 4:30 in the morning, going to bed at 11 o'clock every night for 4 days. And you would think I would be exhausted. The opposite happened every night. I didn't want to go to bed because I was so freaking excited for the next day. I'm like, oh my gosh, I could do this forever. Let's go. And I realized that when I am in alignment with what I'm meant and born to do, that also changes other people's lives. Man, it is like the greatest Red Bull you've ever drank in your life, and it never stops. So pay attention in that journey of what excites you, what doesn't, and pretty soon follow the things that really excite you, that you're really passionate about, because there is a reason why you were born with that desire, that personality, that insight, that talent, because maybe, just maybe, that's what you were meant to do.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I love it. So, okay. So along that line, what keeps you driven and motivated? So you have the thing, you're going after it, you're taking the action, but what we all know, it's a roller coaster, right? It's a roller coaster, whether we get rejected or we're taking the action, we're doing all the things, we're listening to our mentors and we're really leaning in, but we're still not feeling that traction and that momentum. So how do you stay driven and motivated? What do you hang on to during those times?
Well, for me, it is 2 things. Number one, that quote that I read you, I think about it every day. It's like, there is something that will probably, if not already has happened to you, that will be your pivot point as well. And mine was born out of frustration, the fact that nothing was working. And you're not alone in that, by the way. I don't know anybody in the entrepreneurial journey that this didn't happen to as well. So there's the pivot point, and that really keeps me going. But here's the other thing. Is when you are pushing and you hit an obstacle or a wall, well, it's inevitably going to be happening to you because of the fact that that's just the game that we live in. But when you start getting some successes, when you start like feeling something happening, all of a sudden, great, it kind of gives you confidence to keep going. But here's the other thing you need to remember is that when things aren't working, sometimes our default as entrepreneurs is to go to one thing, which is hustle. Like if we're not getting the results, let's just hustle. Let's keep pushing through. But I found out that when we do that, there's something that we're missing. And that is, none of this works if you don't work. I don't mean like you're broken or anything like that. What I mean is, I used to hear this word called mindset all the time. You still hear it now. I hated it. I'm like, that's the stupidest thing. It has nothing to do with your mindset. Until I realized that every success I've ever had started working when 2 things happened. Number one, I connected with my authentic self of who I was meant to become and not trying to be somebody else, which I tried to be for probably 15 years. And number 2, when I realized that I just needed to understand and be the person I was meant to be, but also have that right mindset of where I was going with this and how I needed to deliver this. It really is, we hear this all the time, 80% of your results are psychology, how you think. 20% are the actual actions as well. And why? I mean, if you think about it, Elon Musk talked about this sort of indirectly. He used to talk about how we used to focus on the car to make the car great, and it worked. But he's like, you know what got us an order of magnitude better? To focus on the robots, not the cars, which sounds totally counterintuitive. Focus on the machine that builds the machine, not the machine itself, the car. And so when you start focusing on yourself, and your leveling up doesn't have to do with your program or the content you're building, it has everything to do with what is inside of here right now. Because when it's not there, when your actions aren't aligned with your mindset, it's like putting on the gas and the brakes at the exact same time. And so you're like, why can't I get anywhere? I'm hustling, break,
Mhm.
hustling, break. And it really is sometimes more about what you need to shed, what you need to not do versus what you're doing. You're probably doing the right things, but I found that there's this sort of this magical moment when all of a sudden doing the right things connects with thinking the right way or being who you authentically are. That's when the magic happens. It's
Yeah.
it's it's unbelievable. In this book, 10x is easier than 2x. I love Dr. Benjamin Hardy. He's amazing. I think this is probably one of the greatest, and I have a book, one of the greatest entrepreneurial books in history. And he talks about the statue of David, Michelangelo. It's like widely known as one of the greatest statues of all time.
Mhm.
It's the most perfect. And Michelangelo was approached by the Pope. And the Pope asked him, like, how did you create such a masterpiece as the David? Like Michelangelo was the ultimate entrepreneur. He dug up cadavers and studied the body. It was disgusting, right? He would pull these old cadavers and just he would dissect them, and he really understood the body. And he said to the Pope, it was easy. All I had to do was take away everything that wasn't the David. So is having the life of our dreams and having the success that we want more about doing something, or is it actually removing the things from us that are actually keeping us from getting there?
Ooh, that's so good. That's something really to think about, right? Those things that are really not serving us. And I think it's just bringing that awareness every time we get to that place and managing that mind. It's all what happens between our two ears. And another thing that I had heard recently is sometimes or what we don't want to do is operate off of our feelings, but it said instead operate off of our commitments, which I want to transition this a little bit because you wrote that book and I was like, dang, that's brilliant. Commit first. Can you share a little bit about that? And can you share kind of what inspired you to write that book? Because I think it's so powerful. Commitments are so powerful.
I am a high, fast-paced entrepreneur, like I'm sure you are too. And to sit down and write a book sounded like chewing on glass, like just painful. And about 2 years ago, I had this feeling, hey, Erik, you need to write a book. And I just dismissed it, kind of like all of us. It's that hero's journey. You're called to adventure. You initially refuse the calling, and then life works on you. And I just refused it. I'm like, no, I'm not doing this. And so I didn't for about a year, almost a year and a half. And oddly enough, the weird thing was, I'm like, you need to write a book about commitment. And I'm thinking, here was my first thought. Commitment sounds boring. Who doesn't know how to commit to something? Like, why in the world would I ever write such a boring topic like commitment? Here I am, the author of the book, saying it was just boring. But I kept hearing all of these, like the best in the world, talk about their programs. Usually like somebody who has a program, they have a framework. Okay, if you follow this framework, you're going to get this result. And it's this, and that. So they usually focus on whatever that framework or that blueprint is. And then they'll almost always say, oh, by the way, none of this works without commitment. Oh, by the way, the key to making this work is commitment. So the main thing is actually the afterthought. So the main thing is the blueprint, but oh, by the way, actually the main thing is commitment. And so I'm thinking, well, what came first, the chicken or the egg, right?
Right.
And it's funny, I was talking to Les Brown about a month ago. He and I were on a Zoom, and we were talking about the book. And he's like, you got one thing right. You need to commit first. And I'm like, okay, good. Les Brown just said I need to commit. That's great. He's like, but there's another thing. You need to have the right vision first, because your vision has to be aligned with the right thing to commit to. And he didn't know about this because he hasn't read the book yet. Maybe he has now, but obviously we write about that. Like the first step, the 5 C's commitment is number 1 is clarity, which is of course your vision. So back to the story, back in August, I started feeling write this book again. And I'm like, no, I do not want to write a book. Well, I got a call from a friend saying, I'm writing a book. Would you please co-author this with me? Co-author meaning she wanted me to write like a chapter or something like that in the book. And I said, okay. And so I did. And it actually became a bestseller on Amazon for a few weeks. You know how that works. 2 weeks later, I get a call from another friend. This book right here, Inside the Inner Circle, saying, hey, will you co-author this book with me? Will you write a chapter? And I said, sure. It became a global bestseller, which is the craziest thing ever. And I'm like, wow.
For somebody that's like, I don't want to write books.
My entire life, not a single person has ever called me to co-author a book, and twice in a month. And I said, okay, I'm doing this. This was September at this point of last year. Still nothing happened. Finally, I'm like, okay, New Year's resolution, right? New Year's hits. And I'm thinking, you got to actually write this book. You got to live the principle that you're going to be teaching in this book. Now, mind you, I'd studied this topic and learned about it excessively for the last 2 years. But then I finally said, I got to live the principle of the book. And here's the principle. January 11th, I went live on all my social media channels. And I said, guys, I'm so excited to announce that on May 11th, Commit First is coming out. You can order the book at commitfirstbook.com. You can pre-order it right now. It's coming out. Here's what it's about. I'm so excited. And I was getting all these comments. Oh, this is great. I'm so excited to read your new book. I hadn't written a single word. So then every speaking engagement, which is usually 2 or 3 a week, I've had since January 11th. I said, my book's coming out, go ahead and pre-order it. I scheduled my live event in Nashville to start May 11th, saying, you're going to, all of you here are going to get the book on May 11th. And what I did was I created a path to make it easier to keep my commitment and harder to break it. Normally it's the other way around. It's much easier to break a commitment than it is to actually keep it. In other words, there was no going back. Once I made the public declaration, once I ingrained in my mind that this is going to happen, well, guess what happened the next day? I started writing the book. I actually told my family at dinner, guess what? I'm writing a book. Here's what's going to happen. It's coming out May 11th. And oddly enough, you know what's harder than writing a book?
What is it?
Thinking about writing a book for almost 2 years. Like, we punish ourselves by thinking about something so often.
So true.
When I actually wrote the book, I was shocked at how easy it was. Don't get me wrong. It was challenging. I was shocked at how well the content flowed. I was shocked at how well it came together. I finished a month early. Like, I was like, what? I couldn't even believe it myself. And the feedback on it has been like absolutely insane. But in the book, we talk about how to lock in the thing that you know you must do and stop doing the rubber band thing, coming close and pulling back, coming close and pulling back. How do you get rid of the other commitments that are keeping you from your biggest commitment? Because let's be honest, all of us, as much as we want the thing that we want, will always put the smaller things in front of it because of fear, not necessarily a failure.
Yeah.
But what if we actually accomplish the thing that our soul is calling us to? That is actually,
that naturally comes to people where they just know kind of what they kind of have that instinct, right? Of like what it is that they should, or, need to be focusing on.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And the funny thing is about that is, I think you saw a live that a post that I did just yesterday or the day before, where I was sitting here thinking about this, because along that journey to what our soul purpose is, once we know what we want to do, all of this, your life will start to fall apart in that journey. It always happens. I've heard it over and over again. Every time I level up to the next level here, something inevitably will happen and come into my life, and all these challenges and frustrations. And I always thought that was maybe God's way of saying, okay, you got to want this. And if you pass this test, you're there. But I had this insight the other day thinking, what if that's actually not true? What if it's because we've been told that so often that all of a sudden we invite things into our life, and that's actually a creation of ourselves, not the reality. And there's a book called The Big Leap that I just finished today, actually, that talks all about this. And he studied hundreds of entrepreneurs, and he found out that every single time that was the case, when he dove into the real problem, it was always right here. It wasn't actually, and he went into things like, which I thought was kind of crazy and creepy, like getting sick and laryngitis just before they're supposed to get on stage with this big event. And it was all a mental issue. It wasn't actually a physical. It was really strange, but
it's strange.
But what if that's just a belief? And here's why. Because if you believe that you don't have what it takes, guess what? You don't. That might not actually be true, but you don't. If you believe that you're not the one that's meant to deliver this message, well, guess what? You're not. If you believe that you can actually do it, well, guess what? You're right. Why? Because we will always act in accordance with our belief. And I hate to say this, the goal setter is your conscious mind. The goal getter is not your conscious mind. It is actually your subconscious mind. So what will get you to that finish line versus not is actually not conscientiously hustling and thinking about it. It's actually what's happening underneath that you haven't looked at and haven't uncovered, because that's where your true beliefs are ingrained, is in your subconscious mind. I pointed to my heart. Isn't that interesting? Your subconscious mind, because that is the goal getter. And that is where your true beliefs are, that you will start acting always in accordance with those beliefs until you start to change them. So yesterday, I changed my belief. You can change them consciously, but then you have to really, truly believe them. And when you first say it, you probably won't believe it. But I changed my belief. You know what? On my journey to leveling up, I'm actually going to choose not to have challenges and trials and things come into my life. I'm going to choose that it's actually easy. I'm going to install a belief in me that it's actually easy to get the thing that I want. Mariam Wilson said, it is not necessarily, what if what scares us is not our darkness, but our light? What if it's all about that and not necessarily like the challenges? It's really, we're more scared of who we can become and who we truly are and letting that shine to the world than we are about anything else.
Yeah, I agree. So true. So true. Wow. Yeah, that is something, it's so powerful when we kind of really start thinking about like what's going on and what's holding us back and all the things. What do you think is the biggest thing holding people back from truly stepping into the person that they know they're capable, like that full potential? What do you think it is?
So the easy answer is fear, but I have recently discovered something far more powerful that I didn't actually think was bigger than that. Or self-doubt, limiting beliefs. I mean, they all play into it. And we usually hear fear, AKA limiting beliefs, right? Or imposter syndrome, which is also fear. That's very big in the entrepreneurial world. But there's actually something even bigger than that I just recently discovered. And I discovered it because somebody pointed it out to me. And then I started observing my behavior and I realized, oh my gosh, this is it. And you're going to think when I say it, you're going to be like, oh, that is so simple. I didn't even realize that. It's this. What other people think of you.
Yeah.
Think about that.
Yeah.
I want to say, I hear all the time, don't care what people think of you. That's actually impossible. If you look at the basic human needs, love and connection is the biggest one, or one of the biggest one. Ultimately, as much as we don't want to care what people think, we truly do. But think about it. Why aren't you launching? Why are you hitting the obstacles? What scares you the most if you actually have success? I'll give you an example of this. When I launched this book, there was a pretty big influencer. He has a top 10 entrepreneur podcast in the country. Sent him my book. He took a picture of it and held it like this and something like this, and he posted it on his story, tagged me in it. It never occurred to me that anybody would actually read my book. I know that sounds strange because isn't that the purpose of writing a book? But it never occurred to me that somebody, especially somebody at that level, would actually read my book. All of a sudden, the oddest thing happened to me. I had this big knot in me because I was like, oh my gosh, he's going to read it. What if I misspell the word? What if I didn't have the grammar correctly? What if it sucks? What if it's actually not good? And he tells the world that Erik's the worst author in the world. And I was like, I recognize it. I'm like, holy crap. Yes, it's fear, but it's fear of what? What other people think.
Yeah.
Now I was lucky. He actually messaged me. He's like, can I talk to you? And he sent me a cell phone number. I'm like, yeah. And he's like, dude, you've got into my head. And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, I can't sleep. I'm like, what do you mean you can't sleep? He's like, I started reading your book. And he's like, it's one of the best books I've ever written. And I was like, I've read, and I'm like, are you serious? I'm like, can I get this? Can I record this? And he actually sent me a video saying this. And then he messaged me. This was just maybe in the last 3 weeks, because the book came out May 11th. And so he messaged me about 3 or 4 days ago and said, you know what? I read a lot of books, because he interviews authors. He interviews the biggest names in the country. And he says, this is one of the best 3 books I've ever read in my life. I've got it on my top 3 list. And then on his Amazon best list, he put my book third. I was like, oh my gosh. And all that fear went away. But for a minute there, I kind of wanted to say, please, please, please don't let him read it. Please. And I'm not starting off in my journey either. I'm 20 years into my entrepreneurial journey, and I still have that fear of what other people think. But here's the key. No matter what people think, that's okay. Recognize it, but do it anyways. Take the step anyways.
Good.
That's it.
That's it. Do it anyway, because we have to remember, especially if we have that strong vision, that we need that strong vision to commit to show up every single day. But do it anyway, because if it's in here, right? If it's in here, it's important. It's ingrained in us some way, shape, or form. And now we just need to carry it out. We need to be courageous. And that's what leadership is all about. I feel like is that we get to lead. We get to be the one to step it up to lead, but we have to have the courage to be the one to step it up to create the ripple effect it almost gives other people permission to step up and do the same. And I think that's what leadership is all about. And that's why I love it so, so much. So I'm just so glad. Before, I know we're getting close to the end here. And I wanted also, I know you have a free gift, just something that you have maybe that I know you wanted to share with others as well too, just to really help just continue to help get them clarity, equip them, empower them, whatever it is. But if you want to share a little bit about what that is, and I'll make sure that I have a link I'm going to send out in an email that they're going to get for that free gift that you're going to share. So that way they can walk away just really feeling empowered. And I think the number one takeaway too is just that no matter what level, we're all going through this. So I think it's just that community of support, that, that feeling like you're not alone.
Yes. So a couple of things. Number one, on the link, you're going to get a copy of the book. I'm going to send it to you as my gift. And the second thing is you're going to get the Commit First Challenge, which is ultimately what this is. This is a program that is specifically for entrepreneurs to break through obstacles, gain essentially your unlimited power and how to accomplish your impossible. And it takes you through the steps of this entrepreneurial journey of how you can break through all of the stuff we're talking about and finally just get off of that launch pad and into the sky and into momentum. And as part of that, so I'll also give you the audio version of it too, which is basically like the audible version of it. So once you get that link, there's 3 goodies for you that you guys can jump into that are just going to be super, super powerful. And I think game-changing for you as well.
Amazing, amazing, amazing. I love it. I love it. Thank you so much. Any last words that you have for everybody attending this summit?
Yes. I just want to say that, Mark Twain said it best. I love this quote. He says, the two most important days of your life are the day you were born and the day you find out why. There is a reason why you were born with the talents and skills that you were born with. And let me ask you 2 questions, and I want you to ponder these. If not you, then who? And if not now, then when? So go at it, guys. You got this.
Powerful stuff. Erik Sorenson, thank you so, so much. I am so honored that you're able to join in on this conversation, this summit. Appreciate you so, so much, and all just the golden nuggets that you just invested in everybody here. Love it. Love it. So thank you. Really appreciate you. Hopefully we can do this again soon, because I could just talk to you all day about this stuff. Just
Definitely. I am all in.
All right. All right. Well, thank you so much.